It started on a quiet October evening. I was sitting in my study, the last remnants of daylight filtering through the blinds, when I noticed something strange on my desk. A piece of paper, blank and untouched, lay there as it had for weeks. But there, beside it, was a pencil, though I didn't recall leaving it out. I didn't think much of it. My house was old, quirky in that way, and things always seemed to turn up in places I hadn't left them. I brushed it off and went about my night. But the next morning, that piece of paper wasn't blank anymore. In neat, almost childlike handwriting, there was a single line scribbled at the top. "Can you hear me?" The breath caught in my throat. I had lived alone for years, ever since my wife left, and no one else had access to the house. This couldn't be a prank. I touched the paper, half expecting it to smudge or vanish, but the writing was real. The pencil that had been left beside it the night before was now laying across the edge of the desk, as if it had just been used. I didn't know what to do at first, but there was something about the message, something desperate. Against my better judgment, I grabbed the pencil and, in shaky handwriting, replied underneath it, "Yes. Who are you?" The rest of the day passed slowly, with the note weighing on my mind like a stone. I kept checking the paper, but nothing changed. By evening, I convinced myself that it had all been some weird joke I wasn't in on. But that night, when I returned to my study, there was more writing. "I need to tell someone my story." The air in the room was colder than before, and the faint smell of dust lingered. But I didn't run. Something about this felt important. Whoever or whatever was writing to me, they needed to be heard. So I picked up the pencil again. "I'm listening. Tell me." For a moment, nothing happened. I sat in the stillness of the room, staring at the paper, expecting some sort of movement. Then, before my eyes, the pencil began to shift. Slowly, it moved across the page, as though an invisible hand was guiding it. I was alone too once. Long ago, it wrote. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched, fascinated. It was impossible, but it was happening. I forced myself to stay calm, to stay engaged. "What happened to you?" I scribbled back. There was a long pause. The pencil trembled slightly on the table, as though whoever was writing was struggling to remember, or perhaps didn't want to. Then, slowly, words began to appear again. "I lived here, in this house. I was forgotten." I stared at the words, the weight of them sinking in. Forgotten? How long ago had this person lived here? I tried to think back to the history of the place. I wrote again. How long ago? The pencil hovered for a moment before scrawling a reply. Too long. I've lost track of time. Decades, maybe more. I glanced around the room as if I could somehow see the presence that was writing to me. The air felt heavier, more oppressive. I wrote back, "Why are you still here?" This time, the answer came quickly, the pencil almost scratching the paper with urgency. "I never left. Couldn't. I was bound. No one ever listened. No one saw me. Until you." I swallowed hard. The idea of a ghost trapped in my house, waiting, watching me all this time, made my skin crawl. But I couldn't walk away now. I had to know more. "How can I help you?" The pencil stilled for a long moment, then finally moved again. "Let me finish my story. Please, let me be remembered." I didn't sleep much that night. The idea that there was someone, or something, lingering in my home unsettled me to my core. But there was also a strange sense of obligation. Whoever this was, whatever they were clearly in pain, stuck in a limbo of their own making. Over the next few days, I continued to communicate with the ghost, piecing together their life bit by bit. The letters would appear when I wasn't watching, each one growing more detailed, more personal. They had been a man once, a recluse much like myself. He had lived here alone, waiting for someone to find him. But no one ever did. His life had passed in silence, unnoticed by the world outside these walls. No one came. I waited, but no one came. I couldn't shake the sadness in his words, the loneliness. I wrote back quickly, "I'm here now. I won't forget you." For a moment I thought that would be the end of it. But then the pencil began to move again, slowly, almost cautiously. "You have to remember me. You have to tell others." I promised him I would. After all, what do you say to a ghost? He had told me his story piece by piece, and I had listened. That should have been enough. But the letters kept coming, each one more frantic than the last. "You're not writing it down," he scrawled one night. "You promised to remember me? But you're forgetting." I tried to calm him down, scribbling quickly in reply, "I haven't forgotten. I'll tell your story. I swear." The pencil didn't move for a long time. Then slowly it began to write again. "You can't leave me. You can't forget. You promised." The air in the room grew colder, and I could feel a presence looming over me, pressing down on me. I tried to stand, but my legs felt like lead. The room was spinning. "I won't let you leave." The words burned into the paper, deeper and darker than before. I dropped the pencil, heart racing, and stumbled out of the room. But as I reached the doorway, I felt a cold, invisible hand on my shoulder. "You promised." Now, I'm writing this down just like he asked. I'm telling you his story. But the thing is, I don't think he's going to let me stop. The paper is still there on the desk, and the pencil waits. I can't leave. I can't forget. And now, I'm wondering, will anyone remember me? It's been days, maybe longer, since I last left the study. Time feels slippery now, hard to grasp, and I find myself losing track of the hours. It's as if the world outside has dissolved, leaving me trapped in a shrinking bubble, where the only thing that feels real is the desk, the paper, and the pencil. He writes more now. Every time I look away, even for a moment, the page is covered in new words. His words, demanding, pleading, accusing. "You said you'd remember me. You said you'd help." I can't escape his voice, though I've never heard it aloud. His presence weighs on me constantly. At first, it was just the cold, the unsettling feeling that someone was watching. Now I can feel him everywhere. The air presses down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. The shadows in the corners of the room seem to thicken, flickering with movement I can't quite see. I've tried to leave, but each time I approach the door, it's like my legs forget how to walk. My body betrays me, rooted to the spot as if invisible chains bind me to the room. The door stays closed. My world has shrunk to this single room. I've tried writing back to him, begging him to stop, to let me go. But he only grows angrier. "You're abandoning me. You can't abandon me. No one remembers me but you." I don't know what he wants anymore. I've written down his story, every detail. It should be enough. But it isn't. He keeps saying it's not enough. That I'm not doing it right. That I'm not listening. I'm listening. I'm trying. But the more I write, the more his presence tightens around me, suffocating me. There's no end to his story. He adds new pieces, things he never told me before, but I can't tell if they're real. They don't make sense. Fractured memories, half-formed thoughts. It's like his mind is unraveling, and mine is going with it. Last night, something happened. I was lying on the floor beside the desk, exhausted, when I heard the scratching sound. Not from the pencil, but from the walls. At first, I thought it was the wind. This house creaks sometimes, settling into its bones. But this was different. It was deliberate. A slow, steady scratching, like fingernails dragging along wood. I forced myself to sit up, every muscle aching. The noise continued, louder now, coming from the far corner of the room. I stared at the spot, heart pounding, convinced that if I looked away, something would crawl out of the shadows. But nothing appeared. I waited, holding my breath, until the scratching finally stopped. I thought maybe, for a moment, it was over. But then I saw the new writing on the paper. "You need to dig." My blood ran cold. Dig? What the hell did that mean? I wrote back, my hands shaking, asking him what he wanted me to dig for. The pencil didn't move. No response. Just that single, horrifying instruction, dig. I tried to sleep after that, but every time I closed my eyes, I could hear the scratching again. Not just in the walls now, but beneath the floor. Beneath me. Today I gave in. I don't know why, but something is pushing me, pulling me toward the truth. I grabbed a small knife from the kitchen and started to pry at the floorboards near the corner where I heard the sounds. The wood was old, rotting in places. My fingers bled as I worked, but I didn't care. I had to know what was down there. The smell hit me first. A foul, earthy stench, like something decayed long ago. I gagged, covering my mouth, but I kept pulling the boards loose. When the hole was wide enough, I shone a flashlight down into the crawl space beneath the house. At first, I didn't see anything. Just dirt and dust, and the remnants of some old, forgotten pipes. But then, near the edge of the light, I saw it. A glint of something pale. I dropped the flashlight and scrambled back, heart racing. But the pencil moved on the desk behind me, scratching furiously across the paper. "Don't stop now. You're so close." My breath caught in my throat. I didn't want to look again. I didn't want to know. But I was trapped. If I didn't finish this, he wouldn't let me go. I could feel him closer than ever now, watching, waiting. I leaned over the hole again, forcing myself to shine the light on the pale object. It was a bone, a small, fragile bone. I dug a little deeper, uncovering more. A whole skeleton, buried beneath the floorboards, curled up as if it had been trying to hide from something. I stared at it in horror, my mind racing. How long had it been there? And then I saw it. The clothes. They were tattered and decayed, but still recognizable. Old-fashioned, like something from another era. This was him, the ghost, the man who had written to me. He had been here all along, buried in the very house he couldn't leave. Forgotten. I stumbled back, barely able to breathe. But before I could process what I had found, the pencil moved again. "You found me." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. I had done what he asked. I had uncovered his body. But why didn't I feel relief? The pencil scratched faster now, almost violently. "You know my story. You found me. Now?" There was a long pause. I waited, my heart in my throat, dreading what would come next. "Now you take my place." I dropped the pencil, a wave of nausea crashing over me. No, that couldn't be what he meant. But I could feel it now, the weight, the cold, the shadows creeping in. I wasn't just reading his story. I was becoming part of it. The walls began to close in, the air thickening around me. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. My body was frozen just like before. And then I saw it, his shadow, emerging from the corner of the room, slithering toward me, slow and deliberate. I screamed, but no sound came out. The paper on the desk was blank again. I don't know how long I've been sitting here. The shadows have swallowed the room now, stretching across the walls, merging into a suffocating blackness. The air feels thick, almost liquid, and I can barely breathe. My heart pounds in my chest, but I can't move. I'm pinned here, held in place by his presence, by the weight of his story. The pencil lies on the desk, unmoving for the first time in hours. The paper is still blank, waiting for something I don't understand. Waiting for me. But I don't know what he wants anymore. I thought I was helping him. I thought I was giving him peace. But I see it now, I was never meant to finish his story. I reach for the pencil, though my hand shakes. The weight of the room presses down on me, like 100 invisible hands holding me in place. My fingers wrap around the pencil, cold and slick with sweat, and I force myself to write. What do you want from me? The moment I lift the pencil, it jerks out of my hand, skittering across the desk as if pulled by some unseen force. My breath catches as the pencil moves on its own again, scratching furiously across the paper in jagged strokes. I want what you promised. My heart races. I promised to tell his story. I promised to remember. But what more can I do? I've already uncovered his body, his life, his death. Isn't that enough? The pencil doesn't stop. It moves faster, scratching harder, the sound filling the room until it feels like it's echoing inside my skull. I want you to take my place. I stare at the words, horror washing over me in a cold wave. My pulse quickens, a sickening panic rising in my throat. Take his place. I drop the pencil, backing away from the desk, but the shadows press closer. The walls seem to shift, the corners of the room warping as though the house itself is closing in on me. I can hear something now, faint but growing louder. A low, whispering voice, seeping through the cracks in the walls. His voice. You said you wouldn't leave me. You can't leave me. My legs tremble, but I force myself to stand. I have to get out. I can't stay here. But as I turn toward the door, the shadows ripple and I feel him, right behind me, pressing close. Cold fingers brush the back of my neck, and I freeze. You belong here now. I spin around, but there's nothing. Just the darkness, stretching and shifting, like something is moving just out of sight. The air grows colder still, biting at my skin, and I know he's not going to let me leave. Desperation claws at my chest. I stumble toward the door, my hands shaking as I reach for the handle. But when I grip it, the metal is ice cold, and the door doesn't budge. I twist the knob harder, pulling with all my strength, but it's like the door is sealed shut. You're mine now. The whispering voice is all around me, in my ears, in my mind. I slam my fists against the door, shouting, but the sound is swallowed by the darkness. My own voice feels distant, fading into the heavy air. I turn back toward the desk, the paper still lying there, the pencil waiting. A sickening realization settles over me. The only way out is through him. He's not just a ghost tied to this house. He's in the house. He is the house. I move back to the desk, my hands trembling. My vision swims, the room tilting as though the very foundations of the house are shifting beneath me. I pick up the pencil again, my fingers numb. I can barely think, barely breathe, but I have to try. What do you want me to do? The pencil jerks out of my hand again, and this time, it moves so violently across the page that I hear the paper tear. Write the rest. Finish it. Become part of the story. I shake my head, refusing to believe it. I can't let him trap me here. But the air grows heavier, pressing down on me, crushing me. The walls ripple, the shadows closing in like a living thing, wrapping around my body, pulling me back toward the desk. I write again, my hands shaking, the pencil barely holding steady. How? The pencil moves slowly this time, deliberate. The words that appear are darker, deeper, as though carved into the paper itself. You must write your end. I feel a scream rising in my throat, but it dies there, smothered by the weight of his presence. He's not asking me to tell his story anymore. He wants my story. He wants me to write my way into the house, to become part of the very thing that trapped him here. I stand, throwing the pencil across the room. It clatters to the floor, but the shadows only thicken, swallowing the sound. I try to run again, but my legs falter, and I collapse to my knees in front of the desk, gasping for breath. His voice is louder now, filling every corner of my mind. Write your end. Finish it. Only then can I leave. My hands move on their own, reaching for the pencil, picking it up once more. I try to fight it, but my body is no longer mine. I press the pencil to the paper, my hand trembling. I write the words he wants. This is where I end. The room shifts violently, the shadows swirling around me, pulling me into their depths. I can feel him now, inside me, as if he's crawling through my skin, through my veins. The house groans, the floorboards creaking under the weight of something heavy, something alive. I look down at the paper, my heart hammering in my chest, knowing what's coming next. The pencil moves in my hand one last time, carving the final words into the page, sealing my fate. But then something shifts. I feel it, a strange loosening in the air, as if the weight of the room of him is lifting. His presence withdraws, unraveling like smoke. The shadows that once pressed so tightly against me seem to pull back, and for the first time in what feels like an eternity, I can breathe. He must feel it too. I can sense the relief, the freedom rippling through the house as if he's finally being released from his prison. But in that moment, as I feel him slipping away, something inside me snaps. A surge of desperate willpower courses through my body. With the last shred of strength I have left, I grab the pencil and, before his presence completely disappears, I scrawl a final, frantic line beneath his words. I end this here. I stand outside the house. The moment the words leave the pencil, I feel an invisible force pull away from me. A rush of cold air escaping the room like a gust of wind through an open window. The suffocating weight lifts entirely. The grip of the shadows loosens, and I stumble backward, gasping for breath. Suddenly, I'm not in the study anymore. My hands, once trembling over the cursed desk, now grasp something solid, something real. The door is behind me, open. I step forward, legs shaking, heart pounding, and when I look up, I see it. The night sky above me, the cool breeze on my face. I'm outside. The house stands silent before me, its dark windows staring back like empty eyes. The feeling of dread still lingers, but it's distant now, like a fading memory. I did it. I don't know how, but I escaped. By writing that final line, claiming my place outside the house, I broke free of his grip. The story is over. The house can no longer hold me. I turn away, my breath steadying, my steps firm. Whatever haunted that house, whatever spirit had been trapped for so long, is gone now. And I'm still here. I live to tell the tale.